Okay, webinar started and is recording.
All right, well, good evening, everybody. Happy New Year. Happy New Year to my fellow RAB members and to staff and to the public. I'd like to initiate the January 22nd meeting of the Water Resource Advisory Board. As we get started, though, if Joanna Bloom with the city could discuss the public engagement process, that'd be great.
Yes, thank you, Gordon. I'll go ahead and read some of the talking points. If Karen, you want to share the slides. So my name is Joanna Bloom, and I'm serving as the technical host for this meeting. We'll start with sharing a few slides of the virtual meeting rules that we follow. These rules are in place to find a balance between transparency with the community members and security that minimizes disruptions. We need a full name associated with each person's participation in open or public comment, and we cannot unmute you without it. If your full name is not currently displayed, please go ahead and change it, or you can text me at 303-817-1742, and I can change it for you. There is no chat feature for this meeting, and the Q&A function is enabled and can be used to address Zoom connectivity questions only. Members of the public may be unable to control the audio or video features. Video is limited to city officials, employees, and invited speakers only. I will unmute you when you're recognized to speak and call your name, and Karen will run a 3-minute timer and display it on the screen once you begin your comments. Thanks so much for your participation. Over to you.
Thank you, Joanna. Our first order of business today is to discuss and approve the September meeting minutes. And September, for those of you listening, was the last time the Water Resource Advisory Board met. Are there any comments about the meeting minutes? Remember, we talked about the water conservation plan and other matters. Okay. I would simply like to note that there was a good discussion amongst the RAB members about the water conservation plan. Many good questions were posed, and they were captured very nicely in the meeting minutes. So I want to appreciate the efforts of staff to really summarize the discussion points very well, and I hope that trend continues. Really appreciate that. Having said that, though, can I have a nomination, a move to approve the minutes? We'd like to approve minutes. Second?
Second.
All right, all in favor of approving September meeting minutes? All right. Thank you. And next we'll move on to a public comment period. And this would be on matters that are not part of the presentation materials for tonight. Is there anyone who would like to, from the public, who'd like to speak tonight?
So interested attendees that would like to speak, you can indicate your interest by virtually raising your hand, which is in the Zoom features in your control panel. I do see one attendee that would like to speak so far. Lynn, I am unmuting you now. Oh.
Just to clarify for the public, this would be the time for anyone to speak because there's not a public hearing tonight. So just in case anyone was waiting for an upcoming information item.
Thank you.
All right. Lynn, are you able to speak?
I didn't get the unmute thing.
We hear you just fine.
Okay. Yeah. I can't take these $100 water bills. This is just, these bills have to go down. And what you have to do, I know you have stormwater and wastewater and everything else, but you know who needs to pay for it? The developers in this town need to pay for it. This is much too hard on the consumer in Boulder. $100 water bill, and I don't even irrigate at all. So what is the story going on here? This is ridiculous. I'm a very low user. And, you know, I heard last week someone has a $35 water bill in a surrounding community. You have a lot of things you have to do about flooding and everything in Boulder. But the more that people live here, the more, I guess, some people's logic with the economics of it is that you'll have more income. But that isn't the way it works. The more people that you have, the more demands on a unsustainable system of, the water in this arid region. And, I mean, I'm not telling you anything that you don't already know, but this is hitting the consumer really hard. And I'm not going to stand for it. $100 a month water bill. I've got $3,000 a year more property tax that I have to fight. My whole life is spent from going to taxes to the Board of Equalization to the Board of Assessment Appeals and everything in between, which is my water bill and my CenturyLink and my, everything. There isn't anything left for anyone anymore. It's just too much inflation. And what you people need to do in your positions is expand them into planning so that we aren't developing the craziness. I mean, this is outrageous. At the Meridians, 900 people were renting by the bedroom. CU, Boulder is not a subsidiary of CU. And we're funding all of this, and the water is key. And why are we doing this? Why don't we have some controls on the growth in this place? Jared just wants to grow, and it's not sustainable and it's not okay. And it increases wealth inequity and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's unsustainable, and it's an inelastic market, and more people will come the more you build. Done.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
Ms. Siegel.
Oh, sorry. If anybody else would like to speak, you can indicate your desire to do so by virtually raising your hand. Give it just a second. Okay, I don't see anybody else who's interested.
Thank you, Joanna. I think then that moves us to the next agenda item, which is our principal topic for tonight, information on the 2023 year in review.
Great, thank you, Jordan. And I am Joe Tadiucci. I'm the Director of Utilities. And our primary item tonight is the 2023 year in review. If it's okay with you, I might want to just comment on the public speakers' input. And as the board members and staff know, each year, typically May through July, we work on the budget process. And there's a lot that goes into it. The utility has several $1 billion worth of infrastructure. We look closely at condition assessments. We try to avoid rate spikes in setting rates. And we've, in the last several years, put a lot of emphasis on bill assistance for customers who have trouble paying. I think we received some federal funds from ARPA and have helped our community members with, if I'm remembering the numbers right, maybe Joanna can send me a note if I get it wrong, but I think like $250,000 worth of support. So, but we welcome input. Staff does, and I know the board does as well when we go through the budget process. And I am hearing a little bit of an echo, and I'm not sure where that's coming from. It's not.
Yeah, it's intermittent.
Try now and see if it's better.
Testing.
Is that better on your end?
Lauren, is yours muted? It's muted. Okay, I think it's muted now. That might have been it. So we checked again. It wasn't muted.
Testing.
I think that was.
I think we're good.
Thank you.
Moving on to tonight's topic, the 2023 year in review, which is essentially has become the utilities annual report. Years ago, Chris will remember this, we used to do an annual report that was probably a couple of inches thick. And we had such lofty goals for the amount of content that some years we wouldn't finish it. And so I think it's been great for us to have this memo format for the board. And even though we don't have any action items tonight, I think it's a really important meeting for staff and for the board. Just it kind of forces us to go through the year and document the highlights of what was done and making sure that we're responsive to the funding that the community provides us to operate the utilities and do the capital projects. And having it in this format and being able to share it publicly, I think is helpful as well. And the report itself has a lot of utility, and we share it with new council members, new staff as we're onboarding them. And so it is a good thing for us. I also think it provides an opportunity for staff who don't normally get a chance to prepare board memos or do presentations or don't do it that often to get a shot at that and participate in it. And so we kind of ask for volunteers each year for that assignment and have been able to get a good mix of staff. And tonight we have Christopher Marks, who has presented to the board in previous years on other matters. He works at the wastewater plant and is a treatment process engineer at our water resources recovery facility. So Christopher, I will turn it over to you and you can run us through the presentation.
Thank you, Joe. Let me go ahead and share my screen.
This is always the moment of truth. Not the way we want it to.
Practice helps. Now that I know where the super secret toolbar is.
And while Christopher is doing that, I did want to acknowledge that it's been a while since we've had a board meeting. Maybe go into a little bit more detail tonight when we have the upcoming agenda. We'd normally have a council retreat earlier in the new year, and there would be a meeting with the board later in the prior year to provide some input for that. But that schedule has all changed, so we just haven't really had anything that the board needed to take action on for the last several months. Good.
All right. Thank you, Joe. And I just want to say thank you to the utilities directors for giving me the opportunity to present tonight, as well as to the RAB members for being here tonight. I'm from the Water Resource Recovery Facility, and tonight I'm going to present on the utilities year in review for 2023. I want to thank all the staff members who contributed to the information we're going to present this evening. And that was also contained in the memo. We appreciate the opportunity to share our work with you. The agenda format should be familiar from prior years and aims to complement the material that's provided in the memo, as well as highlight some of the critical projects and plans that were influenced by RAB last year. We'll start with some financial highlights, talk about water supplies and demand from last year, as well as some utilities project highlights, give some regulatory updates, talk about upcoming priorities. And then of course, there'll be a period for questions and discussion. But if at any point in time during this presentation, you'd like to stop on a slide and chat for a little bit about some of these items, please go ahead and just disrupt my flow. So to start with financial highlights, in 2023, the financial planning and analysis team was staffed. That Klingman is the new manager. And we have an echo.
We suddenly have an echo again.
Okay, let's try that again.
I'll continue on. The funding that we received from ARPA, which Joe mentioned just a little bit ago, was distributed in 2023 to the tune of $105,500 out of the total $243,000 that we received. And this was from the federal government as part of the COVID Relief Act in 2021. Also want to note that funding was secured by the utilities engineering team to execute a large facility upgrade project at the Water Resource Recovery Facility. This financing also includes 1.5 million in principal forgiveness, which makes that portion of the funding effectively a grant. I'll also note that we're actively managing our budget in the water fund as a result of the wetter year that we had in 2023, which resulted in reduced water sales revenue.
Chris, since you asked, I would like to interrupt on one question, go back to that previous slide.
Absolutely.
On the second bullet of the $105,000 that was provided for utility bill assistance, do you recall offhand, or Joe, perhaps do you, how much that was actually spent?
So I think the whole 105,000 was given out to community members. I think we had more available to us in the last several months or half a year. I think the requests for assistance have dropped, and there have been other needs in the city, so we've kind of recalibrated where that's directed, but all 105,000 in 2023 went to bill customers.
Joe's correct, and I can just expand slightly. Council initially approved up to $400,000 for this program. And so because of the behavior and the kind of reduced requests from residential customers, our plan is to actually make available the surplus, around $150,000 to our Housing and Human Services team, who is providing some ongoing relief for renters, which would actually include some eligibility for things like utility bills as kind of part of a renter provision as opposed to a direct utility customer. So that's our plan for the remaining funds.
Is the staff there, is that the new CFO?
Essentially, yeah, that's not.
He's replaced, and where did he come from, or what's his?
She's,
She, sorry.
Steph is short for Stephanie.
Cottage.
And she worked for a consulting firm and advised municipalities across the country on and clients on their rate setting and kind of the exact work that we do with the board every year in May through July. So when we saw her resume and had interviewed her, we were excited with her background to get her on board.
She's been here for what, like 4 or 5 months now?
Yeah, end of September when she started. And she's figuring it all out very quickly, but there is a lot to learn. So you'll probably see her in next year's budget process, or this year's budget process.
Any more questions? I will continue on. So this slide is providing an overview of the different groups within utilities, and at the core of the utilities department is operation and maintenance of the required critical systems and assets that maintain city services for public health, community vitality, and safety. To go down the line here, the water utility is covering everything that's related to source water, potable water treatment, hydropower, and the distribution of potable water. The wastewater utility is related to the collection of wastewater and the treatment of wastewater at the Water Resource Recovery Facility, or as I'll be referring to it for the remainder of this presentation, the WRF. The stormwater and flood management utility provides and maintains effective stormwater collection and flood management systems, which are critical within the city at all times of the year. We also have Public Works Business Services Division as a team, which is an outcome of the Public Works assessment that was conducted a few years ago. And it supports both the utilities department and the transportation mobility department with accounting and financial transaction services, GIS and asset management support, administrative services, and project management of non-CIP departmental needs. We'll get into some of the watershed supplies, and this slide is providing a graphical representation of the snow water equivalent or precipitation that was received in the 2023 water year. I just want to note that the water year goes from October of 2022 all the way to October of 2023. So it's a little different from the calendar year. The left-hand axis on this is showing inches of precipitation, and the comparison that's being presented is between the average precipitation from 1991 until 2020 compared with the 2023 water year. The data provided is coming from a critical monitoring site in the Silver Lake watershed, which is referred to on the graph as the University Camp Snowtell site. What I want to draw attention to is that the snow water equivalent in blue is following the historical median in general, which is shown in orange. And that precipitation followed the average until summertime when we received more rain. And that provided some additional inches of precipitation. So you can see that the yellow line is the average precipitation historically, and then that gray line is the previous water year. And you can see that as we get towards the tail end there, we're creeping above the average and finish a little bit higher there by, I think, about 4 to 5 inches tops. So the takeaway from this slide is that 2023 was wetter than average, above all else. We look at the daily water demands that the city has. The graphic that I'm showing here is providing a comparison of the historical daily average demand for potable water, which is in gray, and then the daily demands from 2023 are being shown in blue. And the dates on this graph are actually the calendar year instead of the water year. And the y-axis is being shown in millions of gallons per day that is being sent out into the distribution system. And so these trends are tracking pretty well together as you progress up until looks like early June or late July there. And we start to see that the blue line tracks much lower than what the historic average is. And this is one place where we're seeing that wetter year come into play. And you can also see that the blue line continues to kind of stay below that gray line for the remainder of the summer until we get into probably mid-September. So in general, the point of this is that 2023 was wetter than average. And so irrigation demands were really not as high as they normally would have been. And we're seeing that here in this graph.
Sorry,
Go ahead.
you said potable water. But
Potable
that
water.
includes irrigation?
Yes.
Okay.
Because
That's
the-
a distinction I would make. Okay.
Yeah, potable water is going out into the distribution system from the treatment plants and then is being used from there.
Right. So it's all included.
Yeah, that's correct.
And by that then, are you referring to lawn watering at residential properties, things like that?
Yes,
That's principally what the irrigation water would be.
yes. So one of the things that usually happens in the summertime is we get a peak irrigation demand. And typically that is around 30 million gallons for a day. And that's kind of the threshold of saying, here's where our peak water demands are throughout the summer. Just note that this is the first year in recent history where there was not a single day that was above 30 million gallons of water per day. And I know that the gray line does not actually go up and touch the 30 million gallon line, but that's just because as you take a historic average, you don't really see those peaks anymore.
Can I chime in? Sorry to interrupt your flow, but this is a really good graphic to kind of illustrate our financial reality in utilities. And during the COVID years, when the majority of the city or organization was in financial difficulty because of less tax revenue, our situation doesn't trend that way. We're not paid through sales tax, or it's through our utility customers paying their utility bills. And so our usage patterns were a little bit different during COVID, but our revenue was generally about the same or average. In a year like this, where the water demand dips so far below the historic average that it has a direct correlation to our revenue. And so we have to watch them carefully throughout the rest of the year and make some decisions and figure out how we're going to manage that to balance the books for the end of the year. And fortunately, we've been able to do that and have been successful, but that's where our financial challenges come from, some of them.
So another thing that I'll add is that in the late nineties and early 2000s, our single demand days were actually about 40. So in comparison from how much we previously used to how much we currently use, there's been a significant change in that benchmark, and it's decreased by 25%. And to kind of stay on that same trend of water conservation, water use, just looking at the demand of the distribution system to supply the City of Boulder residents with potable water, and also receive the wastewater, the water that's being used then down into the sewer, generated this graph here. And this is a year-by-year comparison of potable water as well as wastewater. And the annual potable water demand or production is what is in blue. And then the annual totalized flow to the work is in green. If you're wondering why these lines are not a little bit more similar correlated, it's just because the water use in summertime includes outdoor irrigation, and that does not go to the collection system. It does not go to the sewer. There's also inflow and infiltration that we refer to as I&I in the industry, and that doesn't come from city water use, it's coming from groundwater. And so these two lines have some differences between them. But the major takeaway that I want to point out is that as we look back from 2013 onwards, we have a decreasing trend in both of these lines, showing that we are continuing to actually reduce water on a totalized annual basis. So in addition to everyday operations and maintenance, utilities works on specific projects to improve critical infrastructure throughout the system. And I want to take some time to highlight a few of the projects and programs from 2023. The first is going to be a water utility project, and that's the Albion Dam rehabilitation, which has completed its second out of 3 years. And utilities aims to be complete with this project in 2024. The picture on the left here is showing an aerial view of different forms on the dam that are being filled by a concrete conveyor system at the top. And I just want to point out that there's areas of that wall that are resurfaced and new, and they look very fresh. And there's this other areas that are showing the current state of the dam and really illustrating why this work is needing to be done on the upstream wall. The other photos shown as we progress to the right are the degraded downstream face of the dam, which has not been rehabilitated yet, as well as a view of Albion Lake, or the reservoir, from higher up in the watershed, which was drained prior to construction. And that's just an aerial photo of showing the natural beauty of the area. So moving forward with water utility projects, we have the Barker Gravity Pipeline rehabilitation that has also progressed in the last year and is currently sitting at about 65% complete. And this is out of a 12-year program. The map that you're seeing on the lower left-hand area shows the actual pipeline as a red line. And then it shows the areas of that pipeline that have been rehabilitated, which are highlighted in blue. For scale, that line is about 12 miles long, and the efforts are aiming to complete about a mile every single year. The image on the right-hand side is something that you all have probably seen before, and it's just to show, again, the slip lining method for rehabilitation that's being used. This method it's important because it's less disruptive to the areas where that pipe runs through. Normally, you might have to actually do an open cut, disrupt a whole area, and the slip lining doesn't do that. So we don't actually have to do open cuts or excavation for nearly 90% of the project. which is scheduled to be lined, and only about 10% is gonna need excavation.
Is that, the whole line gonna be rehabilitated or some of it still satisfactory from historically?
Most of it is not and needs attention. There's a portion of it that runs on a really flat grade and is kind of benched into the hillside. And is old concrete pipe. It's not pressurized and water is running through it. All of that needs to be lined or replaced. And then as the pipeline crosses valleys, it goes down in a drop, actually pressurizes that part of the system. And at least one of they're called siphons, one of those valley areas was still in decent shape, but pretty much the rest of it needs attention.
What's the expected life of this slip line rehab process?
Well, it is an amazing product, and credit to our engineering staff for figuring out the solution for a potable water project. It's UV cured, and we can actually bring in a sample sometime. It essentially becomes a fiberglass pipe inside of the original pipe. And it is a fully structural pipe, I would say 50 to 100 years if we take care of it. It's basically like a brand new piece of PVC. It's not PVC, but it's like that, probably even stronger inside of the old concrete pipe.
Is this laid through gravity? Like it propels?
No,
or how do you pump it through?
it is, it's like a long tube sock. And every 500 feet on this pipeline, there is an access point, a manhole lid.
Yes.
And it actually gets pulled in with winches, and then it gets and it's stretched out like a sock, and then we fill it up with air and it gets blown up. And then a little trolley with a light tray goes through it and cures it in place. And so the benefit of that, the pipeline is 10 or 11 miles long, is the amount of ground disturbance to do the rehab this way is minimal compared to what it would be if we had to dig up the pipe and replace it.
It looks like you're trying to go from upstream to downstream or left to right on the diagram. I see there's a notable gap over on the left that's not colored in blues. Do you know why was skipped over?
I don't know off the top of my head, and my eyesight is not good enough to see that from here, but I know there are some tunnels that may be getting saved until later in the project, so I suspect that may be what it is.
I can just maybe go on top of that briefly. So I should introduce myself, Chris DeVille, Deputy Director of Operations. Joe is right. I believe some of those sections, there's either siphons or tunnels, so it's a little more strategic to prepare for that area. The other item to note that's visible on the map is the different coloring of the land topography. So that kind of just loosely indicates ownership. So we have various private owners, we have public lands, US Forest Service, and a few others in the mix. So based on permitting and approval for access, we sometimes have to skip around where the work occurs. So.
Any further questions? I'll keep on moving. Which is yet another water utility project that we'll talk about. The virtual rendering on the left-hand side is from a design that was completed in 2022 and was actually featured during this update last year. The image that you see now is this very same rendering, but it's actually what's now in place as new assets at the 63rd Street Water Treatment Plant. These pumps are probably about 8 feet tall, and they're providing flow and pressure to the distribution system, which is providing all of the water to the different homes and businesses throughout the city. And there is an increased capacity and service flexibility that these pumps are creating because VFDs have been incorporated. And if you're not familiar with that, it's a variable frequency drive that allows you to run the pump at a lot of different flow rates, whereas in the past it was really just a low and then a high, and it would just switch back and forth. Whereas now we're able to ramp up and ramp down to just operate the system a little more effectively and efficiently in general.
If I can comment on that, if you think of it like a dial, we used to turn up flow rates in our 63rd Street plant in 4 NGD increments, and there was nothing in between because of the pump. They're either on or off, and so now you can pick any number between 0 and 16 and set it for that. It's a simple thing, but it's a big deal for our operation.
Yeah, we have a lot of them on the wharf, and they're extremely handy to have to just create flexibility in how you're operating a system. On the right-hand side is this large green tank that is providing Batasso with a larger storage capacity for their treated water. This project was more costly than anticipated. Archer Western was hired to complete the disinfection capacity and corrosion control project. And their plans are to spread the costs out over the course of the project, since this tank and a number of other things in our post-pandemic world are more expensive than we initially anticipated for during planning.
Is any of that cost increase related to difficulty getting materials or?
Absolutely, because the demand for materials has shot up while producing those materials didn't increase during the same time. And so we're seeing lead times that are in excess of 6 months to a year or more, depending on what you're ordering. And we're running into the same types of issues with projects at the wharf, to the extent that we changed the way that we're doing our project delivery to enhance earlier delivery, because otherwise we wouldn't have met deadlines that we're aiming for.
When you say that, you mean you're like incentivizing contractor performance through schedule or?
We're expediting schedule by incorporating the contractor sooner.
Okay.
I'll just comment. I think we have on occasion had some performance incentives over the history of time, but I'm not aware that we actually have those provisions in these current projects right now.
Okay, there's no questions about these items. And we'll talk about the wastewater utility projects. Because where there's water pipes, you're also going to have sewer collection pipes that send the water that the city uses to the wharf for treatment. And these collection pipes also need some improvement to ensure capacity of the system is maintained and that backups don't occur. The map on the left-hand side here is showing 3 different phases of improvement for the largest pipes within the collection system. The yellow line is phase 3, the blue line is phase 2, and the green line is phase 1. Phase 1 work was completed in 2003 via lining of the existing sewer. Phase 2 is what is currently being performed and involves construction of a new sewer along a new alignment. And phase 3 is going to be performed in the future and will comprise lining the remainder of the existing sewer system. I'll note that microtunneling under Valmont Road is a method being used to prevent shutdown of that critical travel corridor, which would obviously be very disruptive otherwise. And as I advance here, the image that's just shown up is a 42-inch Hobos fiberglass pipe that's shown next to an excavator that was during a groundbreaking ceremony. And this is the pipe size that's also seen on the far right image, which is over near the wharf where the sewer, where the collection system is being rehabilitated and upgraded. That 42-inch line also connects with a 32-inch line that comes from the gun barrel area. And then this is all delivering influent into the water resource recovery facility via a 60-inch pipe. So it's a very large pipe, but it's not actually the largest pipe that we have within the collection system. So moving on to stormwater flood utility projects. This slide is featuring photos of work being performed in 2023 within the city and is including enhancements to the storm sewer, drainage, a new manhole, and piping generally. Some of these were kind of complicated and it's not my field of expertise, so I'm gonna pass this over to Joe for better project sharing on these.
Yeah, and I might want to just comment on one of these projects, the first one on the left there, 21st Street and Floral Drive. And on the last slide, you saw the main sewer project, which is a massive tens of millions of dollars capital project. But with Boulder being an older city, we sometimes run into these, for lack of a better term, stuck issues. And this project was one where there was a buried line that was leaking. I think it was part of a private system before. At some point, the city took it over, and people who live nearby, their basements are filling up with groundwater. And it's only a handful of homes, but it's one of those things that there's not an obvious solution, or even within our organization, absolute clarity that we own it or which department's responsible, or even within utilities, and our team has to work through those issues and come up with solutions. And it can be as complicated as a much bigger and more expensive project. And if we just leave it as a stuck issue, people are kind of suffering. And so we always have a handful of those things that we're working on and trying to fix, and proud of the way the team comes together and figures it out. I might leave it at that for this one.
Okay. Then we'll move on to another storm and floodwater project. This is a rendering of the South Boulder Creek flood mitigation project that had design work performed in 2023, but is going to continue into design this year as well. The image that is shown up here is depicting the water detention that will be near Highway 63. And in green near the top center of the photo are the constructed additions that would help manage the flood waters more effectively.
Excuse me, Chris, you could go back on that. On the South Boulder Creek flood mitigation project, Joe, do you know when the current schedule is for the, I believe it's the 60% design report, which would be the next big report coming out?
Yes, it's scheduled to come out here in the next month or so, and we just did a pretty significant update for members of the public that might be watching to our website. And it also talks about some upcoming board and council processes. The last kind of city process step and approval has to do with open space and a disposal process. There's not really a role there for RAB, but there'll be some things coming up.
All right. Joe, I believe these are your slides as well.
Now that you say that, I think you're right. So related, in the South Boulder Creek project that we just talked about is one that has been in discussion, and the city has been working on it for 25 years or more, and kind of going through a process of elimination, looking at alternatives that has some really sticky issues associated with it that the community wrestles with, and we understand that. And then we have another one that the board took action on last year in the form of the Upper Goose Creek and 2 Mile Canyon Creek flood mitigation plan. And all of the city was developed in the late 1800s before modern floodplain regulations, and a lot of development occurred in our drainages. And so there are always tricky land use and private property issues with these projects. And so the team works really hard to try and find consensus solutions, but it is difficult. And there was a lot of interest in this one related to Reach 6 and an area that has a lot of trees and grassy area. People understandably concerned about what will happen during construction. And the project seeks to, in part, solve the issue you see in the photo on the slide. This was during a thunderstorm last year. And that is I think it's a Toyota 4x4 that is pulling a Subaru out of, that's actually that street sign, that's Broadway. And so, the stormwater system is undersized there. And we have a project to upsize the stormwater system. It's part of a bond that I'll talk about on the matters. And, if we collect that water in the stormwater pipes, it has to have somewhere to go downstream. And so there's a whole system of repairs that we have to make. And we just have a lot of work to do and really appreciate the board's input and deliberations when it comes to these plans that we ask you to look at and make a recommendation.
Will you be giving an update on that for Goose, especially that Reach 6 during matters from staff?
I was really just planning to talk here and, but you're reminding me, after the board took action, we had a pretty significant community meeting in November of last year. And unfortunately, there's a lot about utilities that's not flashy and people aren't interested in our projects oftentimes. And no matter how hard we try with public notice, we might put together a community meeting and have less than 10 people show up. This one that we did in November, I think there were 100 people there, 60 or so in person, and the balance virtually. And I think the team did a really nice job of walking everybody through that. The project is starting design here in 2024. And so we'll be working on the design for the next year or so and hoping to go to construction on elements of this mitigation plan in 2026. Given the interest in preserving the current conditions in that Reach 6, we are relooking at a piped alternative under Edgewood Drive and having a consultant kind of revisit the feasibility of that. Don't know what the outcome of that is yet.
Is that a pipeline that would run that whole stretch through there? From like 19th to
19 down to
Folsom
the,
or something?
yeah,
All underneath the street?
yeah. And if the board remembers, the whole plan, which was 2 different creek systems, and because of the development in other areas, they're all already, like on 2 Mile Canyon Creek, it goes back and forth from an open channel above ground to a large pipe section. In order to convey the floods we're trying to protect the community from, 100-year flood magnitude, the pipes have to be enormous, like the size of the wall behind you and that level of magnitude. So fitting that underneath a street that has other utilities and existing things is a bit of a magical act.
And the 100-year flood protection, that's the decision was made to do that level of protection based on.
It's the regulatory floodplain, and across the city's 16 drainages, there are instances where there is so much development and constraint that it's not even possible to get to a 100-year level.
Right.
Gregory Creek is another one that is much less than that. We're aware of community discussions around climate change and the fact that the magnitude of storms are getting larger and more frequent. And we're factoring in that into all of our utility work, including our water supply planning. But the level of development that has already occurred in the city, generally 100-year is kind of what is within reach for us.
Do you know the timeline of that consultant report on the piped under Edgewood option?
I'm guessing Q1, Q2 here of this year, but I'll see if anyone sends me a chat message to refine that answer.
Any further questions on this item? Then I'll go ahead and move on to multi-departmental collaboration. which Joe, I believe you wanted to also share on this.
Yeah, I have mentioned, and I think our team has reported out to the board at various times. Unfortunately, across the country, cities and communities are wrestling with people living outside and camping issues. And so that has become a situation here in Boulder. And used to be that we had departments kind of working independently with outside contractors. There's just unfortunately is some cleanup work associated with that. And it's something we took on in utilities in 2021, and city council in the approved budget gave us an initial crew, then doubled that in 2022. And we've been working with our police department. And I would say also working with the unhoused community and our housing department to try and encourage people to services and shelter, but not everybody makes those choices. So it is a scope of work that we've taken on, and we've had to establish our processes and the whole program since 2021. We've looked across the country at how other cities do it and have found most that have these types of activities have it within their public works department. So I would love it if society came up with solutions for these issues and we could work ourselves out of a job in this scope of work, but for the moment, it is part of managing the city.
And Joe, how is that position under utilities? Is it making sure that their waterways are clean?
Yes.
Is it, yeah,
Yeah.
and that's how it got under utilities and water?
Yeah, and we started with a crew that was solely funded by utilities, and we just focused on the creeks and drainages, because that tends to be the locations that people want to camp. And then city council added a second crew out of the general fund, and so the team can go to other areas and parks and other city property to help out where needed there.
I know that some other cities in Colorado and around the country, it does fall under utilities, but there's some security issues with crews going out and addressing, doing cleanups. And so is there some sort of
For sure.
coordination with the police when you send crews out?
For sure. Each week, the team has a variety of activities. And there have been many court cases across the country where this type of work has been challenged. And so giving people adequate notice that we're going to be coming through, and we generally do that each week towards the end of the week. And then when the team is interacting with the unhoused community, unfortunately, and it's not, you can't paint in broad strokes, it's not everybody, but there is a significant portion of the population that's dealing with mental health, untreated mental health issues, addiction issues, and things like that. So for the safety of our team, when they're having those interactions, which I'm really proud of the way that happens and how much compassion our team members and the police show, but occasionally something does escalate, and it's important that the police are there for everyone's safety, including the people that are camping. There are other days of the week where there may be abandoned materials and the team isn't having those interactions with people, but they go around in their trucks and clean up and pick up. And you can see on the slide here some of the metrics that are just the tons of trash. And I think we have 2 or 3 pickup trucks, small dump trucks. I say pickup, small dump trucks. And each week, even in the office area that I work in downtown, I see truckloads of stuff getting picked up.
What all city departments are involved in the SAMPS group or program?
So it's a partnership between Parks and Recreation and City Police, as well as
And
utilities.
housing, city manager's office, city attorney's office. There are a number of departments.
And can you just refresh our memories a little bit? how much of the dollars going to support this activity is part of our budget?
From memory, I want to say about $300,000 per year annually from utilities and think and then double that, and the other part comes from the general fund. There was initial outlay and expenditures to buy vehicles and some of the one-time expenses, but just the crew's salaries and things like that. It's an ongoing expense.
The numbers you've got on the table on the right are stunning in their magnitude. I'm wondering though, if, since you've been doing this for now 3 years, since 2021, have those numbers gone down? Have they gone up, stayed the same?
We have an action plan for this, the SAMPS team does, and there are a number of different metrics that we track. It's a little bit hard to say. I think we need more time and consistency in the way we're tracking the data. Our approach has changed in the middle of that, and so kind of an unsatisfying answer for people. Just anecdotally, learning about this process and helping our team build the program from the ground up, I can say it is making a difference both in the condition of the city and keeping it cleaner. And part of the program when we're doing the notice is just letting people know what services are available. Every once in a while, somebody's ready to plug in and there are enough people available. It's typically not our department, it's our housing department, but to plug in. And so the most challenging aspect of this work is that the community is divided on it and has been divided, and people have really passionately held views on the one side that this is the city of Boulder, we're a municipality, it's our role to keep the city clean and safe. And then on the other side, there's a as equally held point of view that there are so many gaps in society and these people have nowhere else to go, and we're violating their human rights by not letting them sleep outside and have shelter. And I think both parts of the community are right in their points of view, and so we have to navigate that carefully. And I think the compassionate approach that the team does is a big part of striking that balance.
Is it the total budget for this whole program then from the city would be like $1 million or $1.5 million or something?
Now, when you factor in, like, there are urban park rangers that are part of the program, downtown ambassadors that are funded separately, but I think we have a link to the funding. It's millions of dollars per year, the whole SAMPS program. I can send the board a memo where we have briefed council in detail. And if you're interested, on February 8th, our housing department is going to do an update on all the homelessness programs. I don't think this is going to feature a lot in the presentation, but the memo that has gone to council has a ton of detail on the SAMPS program. So I can forward that to
Portion of the work we as the utilities department is contributing is pretty small to the overall effort then. At least in terms of dollars, maybe not in terms of the staffing or people.
But it's a manageable portion, and I think we have to do it. It's probably split. The primary components are probably split 5 or so different ways, and we're one of those 5. But I'll, Chris and Joanna, if you can help me remember, I'll be sure to pass that memo on to the board. Light reading, I think it's at 80 some pages. Really? But it includes everything housing and homelessness in the city of Boulder, not just the SAMPS portion where people are living outside.
What does the acronym stand for? Sorry. Gil.
Safe and managed public spaces. Sorry, I'm hurting your flow and timing here, but you're.
Nope, I'm looking around to make sure there aren't any more questions so that if I can keep moving forward, then I will. Then moving on, we shall to some regulatory updates, which is where I get to talk. Yeah. Because we're going to talk about the water resource recovery facility again, and we're required to meet effluent discharge permit limits that are established by the state of Colorado and the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System, or NPDES. Future limits are going to change according to the timeline shown on the slide, which I think everybody has actually seen at some point in time before because it's been floating around for a while. But it does very effectively capture the summary of what we're looking at moving down the road. So currently, the WRF is already meeting the limit specified for total inorganic nitrogen, or TIN, and is performing the phosphorus upgrades project so that treatment of phosphorus can be included, and that's going to be part of the next permit. We will have a phosphorus limit, which will come as an annual median, and I'm sure you're all familiar with this from previous meetings, but if not, this is just catching up again on some of the limits that we're anticipating. We do not have them yet. But despite that, we are working on upgrading the system to be able to remove phosphorus. Moving on down the line to regulation 31, which is in gray there at the end and features some really small numbers. This has a later implementation timeline. And the point of this regulation is to protect source waters, which are obviously influenced by facilities like the WRF. And part of that regulation is the VIP program, which I'm sure you're also familiar in. We have some VIP targets that are presented up there as 9 and 0.8 for nitrogen and phosphorus. This is additional permit compliance time that we're earning year by year by voluntarily reducing nutrients in the discharge well in advance of when it's required. So our permit is not as stringent as what these numbers are showing, but we are still meeting those and in many cases exceeding some of them for at least nitrogen. And we seek to do the same for phosphorus here in the near future with the project that we're working on currently. The image in the left-hand side is just showing a source water, that is, we're working on protecting these things so that the water quality going into the water treatment plants for potable use is also protected. These are all good things.
Chris, before you move on, I noticed that nitrate concentration, the daily maximum is 17.9 milligrams per liter. Isn't the Safe Drinking Water standard for nitrate 10 milligrams per liter?
I would have to double check. You're probably right about that if you're remembering it. And I know there is a nitrate value because we don't want to drink nitrate. Absolutely. Our permit limit is 17.9, but I couldn't tell you the last time we actually came near that on a daily level for any significant amount of time without having process upset conditions. So
I can chime in, Gordon. It's a fair comment. And I think the assumption here through all the modeling and looking at the mixing zones and discharge and where the next downstream water intake would be, that there would be obviously some treatment, from the next downstream user before this effluent would be used. But we do anticipate probably some more stringent daily limits that aren't really reflected here. That would be other permit criteria. Christopher was focusing on the kind of Reg 85, Reg 31 line of things, but we likely will have a lower nitrate limit also as an individual parameter. Yeah.
We are anticipating that, absolutely. And it will circle in with total inorganic nitrogen, which is ammonia, nitrate, and nitrite. And we'll be working on maintaining all three of those as a group. And that will be part of the next permit. Is there any other particular questions on this? Okay. Then I'll move on to the next regulatory update, which is on PFAS. And this is a really hot topic of discussion in the water industry generally. The city is already performing the required monitoring of the regulated compounds in drinking water, wastewater, and wastewater biosolids. There are 6 PFAS compounds that will have drinking water standards And the important takeaway that I want to throw out here is that the drinking water results are non-detect for PFAS, and the city plans to remain diligent in its efforts to continue complying with regulations. PFAS can come from a variety of sources, and some common ones are listed on that wheel to the right, which I scavenged from Riverside, California. One of the most interesting to me was pizza boxes. So just going to show how many places these chemicals have been used and, will obviously be discontinued, as that's a major emphasis of the federal government, is to just get this out of, use, period. But in the meantime, we continue monitoring and, we'll remain diligent.
Yeah, it's fair to say that PFAS compounds are ubiquitous.
Mm.
They're in Gore-Tex jackets, they're in Saran wrap, they're in Teflon pans. It's literally everywhere.
Remember Scotch Guard? One of the first uses of a PFAS compound. The wastewater biosolids have a small concentration of PFAS present because there are so many different places where this can come from within the community at large. And so we do see a little bit of that in there. The concentrations that we're seeing in our biosolids are below the action levels mandated by the state. So we are not needing to take any severe actions at this point in time, but we will continue monitoring to ensure that it stays that way. Right, I'll go ahead and move on. We are going to move on to upcoming priorities. So we're going to talk about 2024 and beyond, and just highlight a few priorities for each utility moving forward. So first off, something that was mentioned right at the beginning of this meeting is the water efficiency plan update. Just want to say thank you to the board for interest and contributions to this update, which is effectively the plan defining efforts for the water conservation program. As mentioned before, this is something that RAB saw last fall, and it's actually gone through the 60-day comment period and has been accepted as is. And so this implementation plan is going to be starting in 2024. Staff is going to strive to implement as many attributes of the plan as resources will allow as we're able to. Two of the main takeaways are listed here on the slide, and that's that, additional reductions per capita use throughout the city, which is a general metric. We're not projecting any immediate decreases or changes to the targets for that. And there is an aim to continue to reduce non-revenue water.
What is the current percent of non-revenue water?
I don't recall off the top of my head. I think we'll have to get back to the board with that.
Let's do that. I would be guessing as well. I apologize. I didn't have that number right from me.
There are lots of stats that we can pull.
I didn't mean to catch you off guard, but I
I can
didn't.
talk about the number of main breaks.
Yeah, right. I didn't know if it was something that we had been actively tracking on an annual basis or.
We do.
And that is principally from leaks and pipes.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. There are other things that happen in our operations. The number is 10%.
Ooh, that's pretty. It's not. But you're getting better.
We can phone a friend sometimes.
So the CWCB accepted the plan as is?
I believe they have, yeah.
I'll keep going.
Yeah, we'll confirm that, John, but that's my understanding as well. Robbie Glenn, who you might remember was leading that effort for us, is out on a well-deserved parental leave right now, as a father, so.
It has been approved.
So sticking with the water utility for the coming year, transmission system map is what's being shown on the right-hand side. And the three different colors are representing different pressure zones. The future goals are including enhancements for measurement via instrumentation to better control the transmission system, which includes a lot of very large diameter pipes that are carrying very large flows. The highlighted segment that's shown as the red ellipsis there is it's a segment that goes south from 63rd along J Road, coming from Diagonal Highway and proceeding south, which is a very large pipe carrying large system flows. And this pipe segment replacement has been designed currently and is out for contractor bidding. It represents the first of many needed pipeline replacements for the transmission system program. Also mentioned that there is the lead service line inventory project that's ongoing to work on understanding how many lead pipes are present within the distribution system, figuring out which ones will need to be replaced as the years go on, and continuing to comply with state requirements to eliminate this piping. I will keep moving.
I think it was noted in the annual, the summary that there were no lead service lines identified. Is that
Yes.
at present?
That doesn't mean that they don't exist, just that they haven't been identified, and it's an ongoing project that's going to continue digging deeper and deeper until we are very confident that there are no lead service lines, or that we identify the ones that truly are there and then go and replace them.
When you talk about water, drinking water and lead, a lot of people's minds go to Flint, Michigan, and some of the horror stories that have occurred in other places of the country. That's not what we are. We don't expect to have
No.
very much at all.
Yeah, just to reinforce, there's no documented lead on the city side of the system, and based on where we're at in the service line inventory of the private service lines, there's no confirmed lead at this time, so that's good news. But we're just kind of still narrowing down through layers of evaluation.
Any other questions on this particular set of information?
I guess I'm curious, when you were meeting with the SRF, the Colorado Water Resources and Power Development Authority folks, if you had any conversations around their funding for lead service line inventories or?
I don't recall. I think we were focused on the projects that were in our application, but we can check with our team and follow up. I kind of doubt it, but.
We can follow up, like Joe said, Amy, the other thing I can contribute to is we started with kind of a range of multiple projects within the water and wastewater fields, and through some ongoing discussion with them, we were, I think, guided towards just bring forward your one prominent project.
Right.
So, yeah, so we narrowed it down to one water project and one wastewater project. And we're, again, quite fortunate to get awarded the wastewater effort on phosphorus.
I think a lot of the state's lead service line funding is going towards some other folks with some serious lead pipe.
Well, speaking of wastewater, Chris, let's talk about your wastewater utility. So I've mentioned this a few times, the phosphorus upgrades project that is currently, we've already gone through design, we've broken ground, but the majority and the bulk of the work is going to be happening in 2024 and 2025. I've provided the image of the plant here to the right, or right front and center, really. And the items that are highlighted in pink are all of the different assets that we need to upgrade in order to perform treatment for phosphorus and manage the repercussions of doing that treatment. I won't go into particular details at this point, but it is definitely a lot of work that's going to need to be happening over the course of the next couple of years. This project is also going to include some major rehabilitation in our primary clarifiers, which just, need a little bit of love on the assets. Previously, you've heard about the asset management work on the water utility, in particular, what we call the AIM project, which is asset inventory and maintenance efforts. And these are going to be advancing for the wastewater utility for both the collection system and at the work to ensure that critical assets are well maintained and that they're well managed to ensure levels of service for the whole of the city. Data is going to help drive appropriate replacement cycles and best practices for capital planning, of which we've mentioned a couple of times that some of the projects that are already happening have been a little bit more expensive than previously anticipated. And one that I'll bring to light is a parallel project for 2024, which is including the complete mechanical rehabilitation of one of the 4 secondary clarifiers, which failed in 2022. This is highlighted as a red circle there, in particular, the one that has failed. The project's cost came in well above estimates, like the project mentioned for Patasso. And this is due to the supply chain disruptions coupled with inflation that is being experienced. So it's not really a simple fix to navigate through these things when we have lower estimates for what the project was going to cost from years ago. 2024 is when construction is going to begin for this asset to come back online for the work, which is going to benefit greatly from having all of its assets online during our winter spring process challenges, of which you may have heard about in the past. Any particular questions that I might be able to answer on these projects?
Well, I guess one, how is the biogas energy system working out?
It's working out great. From a operational standpoint, we obviously have things that, we're starting to, do a little bit of replacement on, but it's all anticipated. And from a financial standpoint, we're doing really well. The RINs market is very strong. And we're continuing to work towards other new revenue streams and profit sharing with Western Disposal, who's our partner in this. So things are evolving and continuing to work really well.
I'm nearing the end of my 5th year on the board, and in my time here, this has been one of the shining stars, I think, of anything that the utility department has done. It's just fantastic. Very proud of it.
Agreed.
Almost
Thank you.
generating as much revenue as the hydropower.
Yeah, not quite as good on an annual basis, but like you say, it's still pretty impressive. Yeah.
And just the staff, the community values around renewable energy and climate goals. For us to be able to contribute directly to that in a number of different ways feels meaningful.
For the phosphorus upgrades, this is the project that is going to be funded in part by the SRF loan. And I'm wondering, you mentioned that the project is going to be going into construction in 2024, or?
We are currently in construction. We've broken ground and are starting to, there's a small asset in the, let's see if I can. Oops, I pressed something.
I'm wondering if when you went through the contracting process, if you found that there was like an increase in the estimates associated from the contractors, from the bidders, associated with it being subject to some federal requirements. If there was kind of, we were talking about increases in, in material costs and difficulty in getting materials. I'm wondering if you experienced any sort of escalation associated with the fact that there would be some federal requirements attached.
This project's moving forward in a design build delivery model. And so that contractor and consultant design build team was actually picked prior to the decision to pursue the SRF funding. So I don't know if that really influenced kind of the guaranteed maximum price, once it was at that stage.
Right.
But
Wonder what the, your contract terms look like, yeah.
Chris, if I may, can you guys hear me? This is Chris Olson. I'm the wastewater engineering supervisor. To the extent that, the contract price was influenced by things like the Davis-Bacon wage determination, et cetera. Long story short is no. We hired a pretty reputable contractor that pays their employees very well. They were selected, in part because of, their ability to retain their skilled staff, and their skilled subcontractors are sort of in the same boat. So there was very little influence on the GMP by going to the SRF model.
Thank you, Chris.
All right. I will continue on if there's no other questions on this slide. So these are some projects that you've probably already heard about a little bit tonight, but one that you haven't heard about that's on the slide is the Gregory Canyon Creek project, which is in its early design for phase 1 implementation and includes feedback from stakeholders like property owners that are along the drainage corridor. Phase 1 is defined as the downstream segment from Pennsylvania to Boulder Creek. And as we're looking into future years, the next flood mitigation planning effort is anticipated to focus on the combined drainages of Skunk Creek, Bluebell Canyon Creek, and Kings Gulch. But the timing of these projects isn't really known yet. All right, if there's no questions on this, then that concludes the slides that I have and the sharing that we have for you at this point. And I just wanted to feature some of the folks doing the actual operation and maintenance and organization of these different utilities projects and the things that are really the core and heart and soul of this utility. If there's any other questions that you have or any discussion that you'd like to have, then please feel free.
Does seem like we had a lot of questions and kind of conversation as we went, so if we're good, so. We can talk more now, or we can move to the.
I'm curious about one thing, to go back to your first couple of points there, Chris, where you're talking about the the maximum daily usage that used to be in the range of 40 million gallons a day, did you say? And the report said that we didn't hit, or we only hit 27 million a couple times this year. And I understand that a lot of that has to do with the rainfall, et cetera, but have you guys tried to do analysis of sort of the per capita conservation trends that we've experienced in the city? I mean, let's say whatever, 4 or 5 million of that was due to excess rainfall, but maybe the other 8 or 10 million gallons a day is somehow due to some kinds of conservation that occurred over the years. Is that something like that roughly accurate?
For sure, we track that information, and we had a significant drought in Boulder in 2002. And across the Front Range of Colorado that occurred. And at that time, most municipalities didn't have a formal drought plan. And we did after that. It's the only year that I know of that we declared restrictions, and just the values and ethics of our community. That was a huge signal, and just on their own, a lot of conservation has happened, and our trends have been decreasing ever since.
We've got some kind of a chart or figures on that on a per capita or per user or per connection type of basis that.
Yeah, we do. I think some of that is in our drought plan and our efficiency plan. And then the peak flows at both water and wastewater treatment facilities, I think, have been dropping progressively.
Have we been able to do like some analysis of how that was accomplished? Like, can you tell how much of it was like more efficient irrigation systems versus internal, household practices of showers and brushing teeth and all that kind of stuff, or can we get at some of the drivers for behind that success?
I think we did a efficiency plan 7 years ago. We just updated it last year. And I think we know in general what some of the factors are, but I think it's hard to pin it down to the level of precision. But I think just less outdoor use and more efficient fixtures is a big part of it.
And I guess the other thing I'm curious about is, have we tried to compare ourselves regionally or nationally to how other cities or other utility districts have done during that kind of same time period?
For sure, and it was a conversation that I was having with the team as we were updating the efficiency plan and looking at other similar cities in the western US as well as on the Front Range. And we are not the lowest of the low, but I think we're, if I remember correctly, we're in the bottom third, and that's where we would expect to be, would like to be on the lower end.
I know often, Joe, we have a kind of a water resources focused night where we provide updates. So we're happy to bring back some more specific, Steve, to your questions and comments at Joe. I know Joe's going to cover the upcoming schedule. Maybe that would be a good time to.
Over that time period, the usage has gone from say 40 to 30 or something like that on average, and what's the population done during that time? I mean, it's got to be what, maybe
I'm distracted. I missed the first part of your question.
I'm just curious to see that per capita figure, because you got to figure that during that same period of time, there's been a pretty substantial, growth in the population of the service area or the city.
I think it has been trending upward, but I also think the city has had some pretty significant growth policies, and so it's been more managed here than other municipalities. But for sure, we can bring back that information, and April is kind of water resources night and has been at RAB, so.
Yes, I'd like to make a short comment that though water demand has decreased progressively, as you can see on the graph here, and you're seeing the same trend of flow going to the WRF. The way that our system works is not necessarily on flow so much as it is about loading, which is something that we have not seen decrease. And so what we're seeing is actually increased concentration of nutrients and things that we need to treat and remove during the system, granted at lower flows, but still seeing the same amount of loading and even increases in that organic load.
One other quick thing I was going to ask you, maybe you're going to talk about this in a minute, but what's the COVID tracking looking like now?
I can tell you while we're moving through the rest of the.
Okay.
It has been generally way lower than the peaks of the pandemic, and kind of bouncing up and down, but I'll go look for the latest email that I have.
Yeah, Joe, maybe in matters from staff, you could return to that.
Yes, I have it here, Joe.
Are there any other questions on the year in review presentation?
No, just a comment. Thank you very much for putting this together. It was very clear, concise summary of a lot of stuff that was going on. And thank you, Chris, for presenting. It's very clear and helpful.
Thank you for the opportunity.
I second that. It was a great presentation, and another year of incredible work by the utilities staff. Very, very impressive. And my only residing comment would be if there is a way that this information could get out accessibly to the public and the city council and others. It should be in the Daily Camera. It should be in the city's quarterly newsletter that comes out. It's just really fantastic accomplishments that utilities has done.
For sure. Appreciate that feedback. We have new council members that have just started as of this last election cycle. So It's the type of information that we share with them, and then as all of our rep members come on the board, it's taken me a while as a director to kind of hit my stride and figure out what's meaningful, but something that I like to share with the board members. I think it provides a good snapshot. And the city manager's office, I might note, has just gone through some restructuring. Had a couple of vacancies and now have 2 assistant city managers, a deputy city manager, and Maria, our city manager. And so reporting lines have changed a little bit. I now report to Pam Davis, who's the assistant city manager. And so sharing this information with staff, key staff as well, just to get people up to speed. But I am also thinking about how to package it so that it could be shared more broadly. That memo format to the board is kind of a distinct style of sharing information, and it wouldn't. We're thinking about how else we could package it up.
Don't go back to the 80 pages.
No.
Why don't we turn now to our next agenda item for tonight, which is matters from board. Are there any items that board members would like to bring up?
I have something. I know when I started on the board, it was sort of COVID time. And so we were in virtual meetings and now we're in the hybrid meeting. And the question came up earlier, if there's any thought to us going back to more of a public meeting structure.
Yeah, I think eventually we will trend that direction. The city council meetings are now open to the public. Their regular business meetings, study sessions are still virtual in Zoom. By the way, we will have a flood study session with the new council this coming Thursday, if you're interested. And then some of the boards that tend to have a lot more public following the work, I think have transitioned back to the public participating in person. We haven't had a lot of interest historically. There have been a few meetings here and there over the years where we may have a busload of people. If we anticipated that, we would make other arrangements, but I would say eventually I think we'll get back there, maybe even in 2024, but still a little bit TBD at the moment.
More out of curiosity than any sort of passionate feeling about it, but thanks.
Yeah, and I think having the virtual and hybrid option, I think makes us more accessible to more of the public just across the city. But then the technology and making the rooms and specific setups work, it's a little bit more complicated. So a lot of IT support in the background. And just in 2023, the board meetings used to occur at our Municipal Services Center out on Pearl Parkway, which is a big facility. It has a really nice, large meeting room. And we now have the technology there if we want to go back there.
I have a brief thing from the board. I may be one of the only people here who gets a paper copy of the bill. But one reason why I do that, and I continue to do that, is because it has inserts. And an insert recently, I'll try to show it for people tuning in, was just a one-pager on what the 2024 utility rates are for the 3 enterprise zones. And my question is, have any gotten feedback on that?
Each year when the rates go up, the community feedback that rises to my level, there's a few here and there. I think our customer service reps on the billing end of our team probably hear a little bit more of that, but hasn't been a ton of feedback, I would say.
With that, then I'd like to go to the next agenda item, which is matters from staff.
All right, and I've got a little bit of a list here, not too much. I think I can get through it quickly. One thing that I wanted to mention is that the city has been going through a review of its board and commission process. forget the number of boards that we have across the city. It's a large number. And there's always been questions of what the role of board members are, what meaningful contribution you make. I know this board we've had some of those discussions in our retreats. And so just taking inventory of the process, I think, if I'm not mistaken, some of you may have done a survey for a consultant that is helping with that work. But I think some of the recommendations are enhancing role clarity, some training tools, both for key staff. If you think of a new director that comes to the city and maybe was hired from another place, and a role like mine, you're responsible for the board process of board secretaries, as well as onboarding for new board members. And I think there's, with our racial equity plan, there's also interest in attracting board members from a variety of population types. So I don't know that I've heard a few report outs on the process. I think council in one of their recent meetings did as well. I don't know if there would be anything striking for RAB that would change in the future, but I do think there is some inconsistency across the city in the way different boards operate. So looking into that. And then shifting gear, just some highlights on financial updates. And in December, as you know, with the board, occasionally in our CIP, including last year, we have some bonds and we talk about projects that will be packaged together in those bonds. It's actually a big body of work for our 2 financial staff members to go through the process of those bonds. And we work closely with our central finance department. In December, the city again received a AAA bond rating from S&P Global, which is the highest rating that you can receive. Last week, we had a bond sale of 96.7 million for 2024 bonds and at an interest rate of 3.44%. Really getting into the geeky numbers here, but it's
What was the term on?
20 years,
20 year?
yeah. And so that is the last water and sewer bond that we'll have in the near term. I think there's another one projected maybe in 2029. We also applied for a state revolving fund loan. Christopher covered that in his presentation. We had a little bit of discussion on it. Historically, we have not gone after those loans because we've just done better in the interest rates with bonds. And so the bond this year was 3.44%, and the effective interest rate of the SRF loan was 3.05%. And then when you combine, and it was the SRF loan was 19 or 20 million, if I'm remembering the magnitude right. And 1.5 million of that, as Christopher mentioned, was essentially a grant and loan forgiveness. So that was a good program on the finances. And then I would also just mention quickly, we had that massive deep freeze last weekend, dangerously low temperatures. I know a lot of community members had frozen pipes in their houses. And last thing you want to deal with in a deep freeze. For our utility, we don't tend to get a lot of main breaks and water line breaks when we're at the peak of those cold temperatures, but then when it thaws out and warms up again, like it has now, and the ground shifts and moves, our utilities maintenance team, there's been an uptick in main breaks. We had one today that had a lane of 28th closed and a few businesses out of water. Normally, they're not quite that impactful. I think we've had well over, on average, in the past, we've had well over 100 main breaks per year. I think we're down around 60, which is really pretty good for national averages. And But a lot of them occur after it warms back up after a severe cold snap. That's what I have for matters from staff. I guess you did ask about the E. coli, or not E. coli,
Yes.
COVID.
Well, one of the things in the 2023 year review was discussion on the Boulder Creek water sampling with respect to the E. coli TMDL. And it struck me that in that packet that we had, that there wasn't much discussion on actions taken. It was principally on plans that were developed or reviewed. And so I'm wondering if you could speak briefly on what occurred in 2023 along those lines.
Yeah, for sure. I misspoke just now. I was intending to talk about the COVID stuff and I said E. coli. But I remember we had that discussion. And I think Megan Wilson, our water quality manager, is on the line, and I know she has some background information on that, so I might invite her to come into the meeting and talk about that. Or she-
Hi. Yeah. Hi, good evening, board members. I'm Megan Wilson Outcalt. I'm the water quality manager, and I can speak to some of our ongoing E. coli activities, many of which we think of as pretty routine, and so did not include in the packet, but some of our MS4 permit compliance activities contribute to sort of mitigating E. coli getting to the creek. So those include things like spill response, responding to any illegal cross connections with the sanitary system that we find, education and outreach, including to specific industries that are known to contribute E. coli, if they don't have best practices or manage their waste properly. So that's things like restaurants. And so we've had some targeted outreach to those industries. And all of those things contribute to keeping bacteria out of the creek. Some of the other efforts that the city organization supports, like creek cleanups as part of the SAMPS work, routine storm sewer cleaning and maintenance, those also help to reduce pollution sources. And I think the studies that you're referring to, Gordon, are really our investigations of the subsewer sheds, because most of the pollution sources are pretty dispersed, uncontrollable. We're really kind of looking for things like illegal cross connections with sanitary, things like that. And so those require those kind of subsewer shed investigations. One significant source that we found out of that is a ditch return flow, and we've been actively working to better manage the irrigation water from that ditch with the University of Colorado. So we're kind of at a point where we've done a lot of the priority investigations that were identified in the 2019 TMDL implementation plan. So we're actually kind of pausing some of those studies for the first quarter or so this year to just kind of review everything we've done over the past 20 years and determine what would be the most effective steps moving forward. So we'll continue our monitoring, which we do monthly. We have a staff person who monitors monthly in the creek and then weekly from, I believe, July through October. Those activities will certainly continue in all of our sort of routine compliance activities. But in terms of that kind of what we think of as above and beyond work, we are kind of pausing to see what the next steps are.
Good, thank you.
So hopefully that's helpful.
The other thing that came up a few minutes ago was the status of COVID. And I just sent a figure to Joanna Bloom. I'm not sure if there it is. And you certainly won't be able to see all the scales and the numbers on the scales. But on the bottom, this goes back to August of 2020, where it starts on the left side of the graph and goes through November. And the brown line is the testing numbers that come from our wastewater sampling, and the blue is county reported cases. And somewhere in 2022, I think it just became less of a practice for community members to formally test and report their test results. So public health officials across the country are really relying heavily on this wastewater testing. On the right side of the scale, you do see that there was a little uptick. I would say more than a little one, that in September, and then again in early November, which I think throughout the course of tracking this, anytime we get to one of the significant holidays or events like school starting or something like that, you tend to see a spike in the graph.
How far in arrears do you get the data? I mean, how long does it take to get the information?
We get it pretty quickly as far as the wastewater sample analyses go. Because the intent of the program originally was to create an early warning system for healthcare. So we, I think, get the data about 2 to 3 days in advance of when we think a spike is gonna happen. And the data correlates about that way.
The turnaround from sample to result is fairly quick. I want to say 2 days.
Yeah, nothing more than that. It might even be less than that sometimes.
Thank you, Joanna, for being able to share that on the fly. I put that image out of the email report that I get every week or so. I think that's what we have for matters from staff, if you'd like.
And the next agenda item is discussion of future stuff.
And I did mention at the beginning, a little bit unusual that it's been since September that we've had a meeting. Do appreciate a few years ago during our retreat that a few board members, including Gordon, mentioned that if there aren't a lot of action items and if staff are just really putting together an agenda for the sake of having a meeting, everyone preferred that we not do that. And I would say for the last 3 years, we have not had a meeting every month. It's a little bit unusual, like I said, to go from October, November, December, not have a meeting. And the retreat timing had an effect on that. But there have been certain months each year where there just hasn't been a lot to go on. So I think just to give the board an overview, I think this year, 2022, 2021, probably is going to be similar to this in terms of the workload and the number of meetings for the board. There was a period in the, I would say the middle teens of the 2000s where our engineering team, Christopher showed that life cycle of the flood projects, and there were mapping studies and mitigation plans, and the director at that time, I think, was having a challenge load balancing all of the meetings because there were too many things requiring board action. And we've done a lot of those studies now. So there will be some unique things that come up. And so I think for February, the thought would be to have a retreat then, probably on the day of our normal business meeting, if the board is available, and that is on February 26th, I believe. And we've used the same facilitator consultant for that for several years and would propose doing the same if that works for everybody. And I know Karen has done some outreach to the individual board members to double check availability, but I think that is how it is shaping up. And then again in March, I don't know at this point that we're going to have any items requiring board action. And so probably would not have a meeting that month. And then in April every year, we have historically every April briefed the board on our water supply situation because it's when we have certain key information like the winter snowpack available to us. That is the month that a new board member starts. So Gordon will have done his time by that point, and we'll get his every third Mondays back. And we'll be having a new member. Then just to give you a snapshot of the rest of the year, Every year, May through July, we have the budget process. The last several years, historically, we haven't had a meeting in August. I think there was 1 year we did. September, I think we have some water quality items that would be meaningful to the board and may require some board action. And then somewhere this year, there's an Area 3 urban services study that is being led by our Planning and Development Services Department. It's kind of the north end of town, very north edge of town, and just for utilities, it's looking at whether we have the treatment capacity, water supply capacity, system things to support that. And so having a discussion with the board around that when the time comes. I'm not exactly sure where that's gonna fall in the year, but that might be a unique thing. And then I think late in the year, possibly some of those flood mitigation plans that Christopher mentioned, or early in 2025, there could be some additional activity that way. And I have so many things open on my computer, I lost track of my sheet, so I was doing that all from memory. But I think that is what I wanted to say. The upcoming schedule. And I would say if everyone's available and we can do the retreat in February, talking about the schedule and the way it's working out and getting candid feedback from the board and how you feel about the gaps in the agenda and the workload would certainly be an appropriate item for discussion.
It would be the 6 to 8 timeframe, or would it be longer?
It has varied from year to year in the way we've done retreats. There's been at least 1 year recently where we did it more in the late afternoon. And so I think if you all have preferences, that's something we can pin down. I think most years though, it has been the 6 to 8 timeframe.
Well, Joe, thanks for lining out kind of the big picture for the meetings coming up in the year. I think it provides good context for us and what to expect.
That's what I have. So we're probably at the end of the line.
Are there any comments from the board on anything? With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor of adjourning tonight? All right, it's unanimous. All right, thank you all. And thank you to the public and especially thank you for staff. Much appreciated.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, thank you.